Good evening and welcome to CYC News for the 9th of September 2018 and the 4th of Nasi 1734 AM. I'm Andrew Nara, and in today's headlines, Trump warns Syria, Russia and Iran against attacks on rebel stronghold. Protests continue in Iraq in a third night of clashes with security forces. Saudi coalition spokesman denies the war crimes in Yemen. Israel praises the US halt to Palestinian refugee aid. Hurricane Florence could pose major threat to US East Coast. Probiotics labeled as useless. And Novak Djokovic ends John Millman's US Open run. But first, to the United States, where President Donald Trump warned Syria and its allies Russia and Iran on Monday against attacking the last major rebel stronghold, Idlib, province in Syria's northwest. Trump wrote on Twitter, President Bashar al-Assad of Syria must not recklessly attack Idlib province. The Russians and Iranians would be making a grave humanitarian mistake to take part in this potential human tragedy. Hundreds and thousands of people could be killed. Don't let that happen. According to Syrian rescue group the White Helmets, hours after the tweet, Russian planes struck parts of the western Idlib. Rescues were underway amid intensive airstrikes. The president's warning comes just days after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo issued a similar warning to Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, saying an attack was something Syria and Russia agreed not to permit. US officials have grown worried that an assault on Idlib could involve the use of chemical weapons if the rebels are able to slow down regime advances. Syrian President Assad's regime has moved armed helicopters closer to Idlib in recent weeks, according to two defense officials. Earlier this year, weeks of violence displaced over 300,000 people in the southern province of Daraa after the Russian-backed Syrian military launched an offensive to recapture the town. About 6.2 million Syrians have been displaced since the conflict began in 2011, with a further 6.3 million having fled abroad as refugees, according to a recent UNHCR report. Over to Iraq now, where security forces fired tear gas and live ammunition on Wednesday, as demonstrations took to streets for a third day in the southern city of Basra. Health officials say at least one person has died and 21 others were injured. Health Ministry spokesman Dr. Saif al-Badr said at least 5 people were killed in clashes on Tuesday, and 68 others, including 27 military personnel, were injured. Anger has swelled in Basra, an oil-rich city 280 miles south of Baghdad, over a lack of basic services and high unemployment. Other points of frustration among the protesters are prolonged power cuts, contaminated water that has sent hundreds to the hospital, and sanitation problems. Video from Tuesday's skirmishes shows protesters throwing tear gas canisters into a government compound and facing off with armored personnel vehicles. Other footage shows the government building burning while heavy gunfire is heard in the background. Political forces in Baghdad, which continue to struggle to form a new government following the inconclusive parliamentary election more than 4 months ago, have vowed to address Basra's problems. But so far, only promises have reached the city. At his weekly news conference on Tuesday, Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said, "I ordered a quick investigation to know what has happened and who is behind it. There are parties that are pouring oil on fire, who are setting people against the security forces to jeopardize Basra's security." A spokesman for the Saudi-led coalition has denied that a vehicle targeted in an airstrike in Yemen last month was a school bus full of children, despite much evidence to the contrary. His remarks followed a statement from Human Rights Watch last Sunday that called the attack an apparent war crime. Colonel Turki al-Malki, the spokesman for the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, said in an interview that the bus attacked on August 9 was a legitimate target. He also said intelligence information showed the bus was not a school bus because there is no school at the time when the incident happened. "We never observed any kids on the bus," al-Malki said, adding the coalition conducted the attack against Houthi commanders and some Houthi element fighters in that bus. Al-Malki also cast doubt on video footage and pictures from the scene of the airstrike, indicating the source of such evidence is unclear. He also stated it was the coalition that conducted the attack against Houthi commanders fighters who were the ones on the bus. Dozens of people, including school children, were killed in the attack, according to Human Rights Watch and the Houthi-led Health Ministry. Mansour Ahmed al-Mansour, spokesman of the coalition's investigative body, the Joint Incidents Assessment Team, said in Riyadh last Saturday that the bus was a military target, a statement that echoed al-Malki's comments. In the interview on Sunday, al-Malki repeatedly pointed to the findings of the JIAT, which on Saturday admitted mistakes were made. To Israel now, where United States' decision to end funding for the UN agency responsible for providing education, healthcare and other services to Palestinian refugees was praised last week. Palestinian officials said the move threatened peace in the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said in a statement Israel welcomes the American decision. It's worth transferring the money to other organizations which will use the money for the benefit of the population and not for the perpetuation of refugees. Israel has long complained that United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East serves to sustain the conflict because it underpins the right to return of Palestinian refugees, a right that Israel rejects. The head of the Palestine Liberation Organization delegation to the United States, Hussam Zomlot, accused the Trump administration of reneging on its international commitment and doing Israel's bidding. In a statement, Zomlot said, by endorsing the most extreme Israeli narrative on all issues, including the rights of more than 5 million Palestinian refugees, the US administration has lost its status as peacemaker and is damaging not only an already volatile situation, but the prospects of future peace in the Middle East. In a widely trailed announcement last Friday, the US Department said it was ending funding for UNRWA because it believed that the United States was shouldering too much of the burden of paying for it. It also said UNRWA had failed to enact reforms. To the United States again now, and Hurricane Florence has weakened but will likely strengthen again into a major hurricane and could threaten the US East Coast this week. On Wednesday, Florence became the first major hurricane of the 2018 Atlantic season, with a maximum sustained winds peaking at 130 miles per hour, making it a Category 4 hurricane, according to the National Hurricane Center. Increased wind shear over the open Atlantic, where the hurricane is currently located more than 1,700 miles from the east coast, had weakened Florence to a Category 2 storm, with 105 mile per hour winds as of 11 a.m. on Thursday. But that wind shear lessened over the weekend, and Florence could regain major hurricane intensity at Category 3 or greater by early this week, as the storm moves northwest, closing on the US coastline. It's too early to tell if the storm will make landfall somewhere on the east coast or if it will turn harmlessly back to sea. Still, there are some troubling signs in the major computer models that meteorologists use to predict hurricane tracks a week or more in advance. Even if Florence stays out to sea, meteorologists say computer models show other systems developing over the Atlantic, almost on cue as the hurricane season hits its peak. The National Hurricane Center is monitoring a couple of other tropical waves in the eastern Atlantic that it says are likely to develop into tropical storms in the next several days. In health news, a group of scientists in Israel claims food that are packed with good bacteria, called probiotics, are almost useless. Their study is among the most detailed analysis of what happens when we consume probiotics. They are seen as healthy and good for the gut, but the results found they had little or no effect inside the body. The researchers said probiotics of the future would need tailoring to the needs of each individual. The team at the Weizmann Institute of Science made their own probiotic cocktail using 11 common good bacteria, including strains of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacteria, was given to the 25 healthy volunteers for a month. They were then sedated and samples were taken surgically from multiple places in the stomach and small and large intestines. The researchers were looking to see where bacteria successfully colonized and whether they led to any changes in activity of the gut. The results in the journal called Cell showed in half of the cases the good bacteria went in the mouth and straight out the other end. In the rest, they lingered briefly before being crowded out by other existing microbes. The principal investigator of the tests, Dr. Eran Elinav, said it was wrong to expect an off-the-shelf probiotic to work for everyone. He says that in the future, probiotics will need to be tailored to the needs of individual patients. Speaking to the BBC, he said, just buying probiotics at the supermarket without any tailoring, without any adjustments to the host, at least in part of the population, is quite useless. And in sport, John Millman, who memorably beat Roger Federer to advance to the US Open quarterfinals, lost in straight sets to 6th seed Novak Djokovic 6-3, 6-4, 6-4. It was a sad come-down for the unheralded Aussie, who put in the shift of a lifetime on Tuesday to oust the 5-time winner with a 4-set victory. In humid conditions that seemed to sap the energy from both players, the 29-year-old couldn't equal the match's intensity against Djokovic, a 2-time US Open champion who's playing in his 12th American Slam tournament. Djokovic said after the match that he'd been very tested and paid full praise to his opponent after the 2-hour and 49-minute match. He said, "It was almost 3 hours, it's midnight now. Credit to John for putting up a great battle. He's truly a great fighter. He's had an amazing tournament, first to quarterfinals. To come out here and to fight 3 hours, he deserves a round of applause." Despite the loss, Millman will climb to a career-high ranking inside the world's top 40 as he heads to Europe to spearhead Australia's Davis Cup tie against Austria. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder that you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Andrew Nada, and from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia, have a good night.